Welcome back to another episode of When Bad Things Happen to Good People, a podcast about censorship and the arts. My name is Todd Sullivan. Joining me as always is Peter Rahman.
Hello, hello.
And today we have a very special guest, Allyson Rice, producer of the new documentary Band Together.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you, Allyson. Congratulations on the documentary. We watched it recently, and what a fantastic film. What a fantastic film. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I want to give a quick shout out to the rest of our very small but mighty team.
Absolutely. Please.
I'm a producer along with Jennifer Wiggin, who is the founder of Atomic Focus Entertainment, and our two director producers are Kate Way and Tom Wiggin.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Can you tell us a little bit about how this film came to be? Like, how did you get involved? How did how did you end up landing on pursuing the story the way you did? Just tell us a little bit about how it happened.
Well, Jen and Tom are married, and they live in Charleston, South Carolina. And they had seen, in a very early 2023, they had seen a local newspaper article about some students who were fighting back in South Carolina when 97 books were removed from their school libraries. And they called me and told me about it, and I read the article, and they reached out to the newspaper who directed them to people down in Beaufort. And it turns out Kate Way had already gone down to Beaufort. I think she and her partner were vacationing down there, and she already started filming. She was going to make a short film. And Jen and Tom talked to her and suggested that this was a bigger film. We thought it was a bigger film and proposed that we all collaborate on it. And so we did. And so Kate was going to focus only on the local story, and we wanted to also wrap the national story in there as well, because it's great just doing a local story, but a lot of times people don't understand how that applies to them. And we knew that book bans were accelerating, and there was some reporting in the news, but not a lot. And so that was our goal, was to wrap the national story around it so that people could see the blueprint of how to fight back at the local level, because that's what they were doing in South Carolina. And it also put a personal face, or several faces, on the fight. So that was our emotional anchor in the story. And then the national part of the story we wove throughout the local story.
Yeah, and I felt like that for me, that local element focused on the three students really helped sort of ground it and give it that, like you said, that personal face. And for me, being kind of an older guy who obviously cares about, censorship and all of that sort of stuff, it's nice to see when the younger generation is sort of stepping up for that same sort of thing, because sometimes in the 21st century, it's hard to tell how often kids are even reading these days, much less caring about what they have access to read.
That is a huge problem, and a lot of teachers and librarians will tell you that it's not the content of books that's the issue. It's like getting our students to love reading, because a lot of young people don't. But something else about the young people that is sometimes twisted in the media is that there are these stereotypes of the younger generations. They're lazy and they're entitled and they're too sensitive. And we have not found that to be the case. These students were very proactive. They worked very hard every time they were preparing to go to school board meetings and when we were doing location shooting. We were so impressed by them and by other students in the communities around that who were also part of the fight. We just focused on these three. But we've been greatly impressed and have gotten feedback from a lot of people who watch the film that feel so hopeful at the end of it, knowing that there are young people who are out there really dedicating themselves to fighting for their First Amendment rights and for a lot of different rights. There are a lot of student groups all around this country and around the world who are doing that. But you got to meet three of them and see how they were
Yeah.
fighting and feel inspired and hopeful because of them.
Yeah.
Maybe for the people, who, oh, sorry, go ahead, Pete.
Oh, I was just going to say that I agree, and I really enjoyed when they met up with some of the other groups, the Peru group,
Mhm.
and had that ability to kind of, you know, tell how it affected them personally and why they got involved with the cause. And, I think when we talk about censorship and how that robs people's voices and robs us of great art as well, we often don't get a chance to like hear from that audience, right? And see the impact that it has. So I really enjoyed that component of the film.
Yeah, in terms of the Peru group, they're from Pennsylvania, and the students that we were following already knew about them because some of the Peru members had testified at the House Oversight Committee meeting that Congressman Jamie Raskin had led the year before that. So the young women that we were following were so excited that they were going to get to meet some of these Peru members. And it was actually the same day that they met Jamie Raskin. So we were on Capitol Hill and we taped the interview with him first, and then we went out to a local park, and that's where we taped the longer conversation between Dalo. For people listening, DALO is the Diversity Awareness Youth Literacy Organization, and that is a book club that the students that we followed had organized during the pandemic. It wasn't an activist group. They just really wanted to have a book club where they looked at diverse literature and characters and from authors who had life experiences that were different from theirs. So that's how the book club started. And then when the book ban started happening, they were like, these are books we care about because they are diverse and we're going to fight for those. So it was a great example of, you know, watching somebody say, this is happening. This is disturbing to me. I care about this. And not just complain about it, but stand up and take action and do something about it, which is what a lot of people don't do. So that was very inspiring as well.
I mean, maybe I'm just realizing now that, people listening to this without any context may not know what the film is actually about. So maybe you could give us sort of a brief synopsis of, what it is, what you guys, how it plays out, what the sort of central story is, that sort of thing.
Right. So the students that were in the newspaper article that Jen and Tom saw were members of that book club, DALO. And they ran into a situation in Beaufort, South Carolina. The students that we follow go to 3 different schools. But what was happening in Beaufort was that certain books, actually, it was just a couple of adults who had a problem with all these books. They complained to the school board, and they bypassed the protocols that were already in place in terms of how to challenge a book that you have a problem with. There is an opt-out policy. If you don't want your kid reading certain material, you can opt your kid out. But these parents went to the board, complained about these books, threatened legal action, and the board just decided to pull all of the books from all the school libraries. And then they put in place these community-based groups. It was some community members, some teachers, a librarian, a school board member. It was a mixed group in every group that reviewed a book. And through these community review committees, they made suggestions to the school board about which books they felt, yes, this should be banned, and which book should go back on the shelves. And meanwhile, our students that we followed were speaking up at board meetings and really advocating for these books and these authors that were being removed. And that's how the film starts. And then we start wrapping the national story around by bringing in people like Congressman Jamie Raskin. They got to meet him, and the students met some best-selling authors who had been banned that were on their list of books that had been removed. And then we also traveled down, this time without the students. We went to Florida because that was the birthplace of Moms for Liberty, which is one of the most vocal so-called parental rights groups out there, and gave the background, interviewed people down in Florida, people like fighting against the censorship that's happening there. And the censorship that's happening in Florida is extreme. And over the course of the filming of this documentary, we watched South Carolina little by little become the new Florida. They are implementing a lot of the same policies and restrictions, and sometimes even going farther. So we did that. We interviewed a senior investigative researcher with Media Matters for America who's had been researching Moms for Liberty since early 2021 when they showed up. This Florida group showed up in Indiana, where she was from, and she was curious about why is that? How could that happen? And started following them. And her articles, Olivia Little, her articles are fantastic. So she's in the
She was a
film.
great voice in the film. Yeah. It was
Yeah,
good to hear her perspective on that, of the kind of global blueprint that they were applying across the US. A little terrifying, I would say, but good
yeah.
to
And
hear.
what we found the longer we filmed was that these book bans weren't really about books. It was a political power grab. And what groups like Moms for Liberty, or what they specifically do, is that they motivate parents by frightening them. Like if you say, hey, your kids are in danger and they're giving them pornography in school, as a parent, you're like, what? And fear grips in because you want to protect your kids. So instead of telling parents, read the book and see what you feel about it in terms of your child's readiness for these ideas, they would print out excerpts and pass them out to people to just read at school board meetings. And they would use book looks reviews, which Moms for Liberty tried to distance themselves from book looks. But it was, and Olivia talks about this in the film, how objectively booklook.info, which was the original one, was a Moms for Liberty creation. It was originally the Moms for Liberty Library Committee. All the ratings and the way they described the ratings were identical to booklooks. And then booklooks.org, I think it was, also came in after .info was the .org, and that was created by a Moms for Liberty member. So as much as they've tried to distance themselves from it, they did create book looks. And it's interesting because at the end of last month, if you go to book looks, there's a little message up there that says, we feel like our job here is done and God is calling us to other things right now. So we're going to end book looks and we're going to take down all of the reviews. So if you think about it, if they're gone, like they pulled up stakes and left, which is kind of what they do anytime somebody starts catching on to what they're really about. They've always said we don't co-parent with the government, but for a while on their press page, they had just photo after photo of them on all their appearances on Steve Bannon's War Room. And when somebody was like, wait, hey, because they said they're not political.
Mm.
So all those got taken down. Yeah, it's just interesting, their methods. But the methods were successful. And Steve Bannon was talking about taking over school boards a few years ago. That was one of the first things I found when I started researching things about the national story and who we might want to interview. And I found an article on Axios Dallas about a conservative Christian cell phone company called Patriot Mobile, who bankrolled a bunch of school board candidates to the tune of about $600,000, I believe, and they won. And so the founder of that company and Steve Bannon were talking to some conservative political action group, and Steve Bannon was saying school boards are going to be the key to pick the lock in terms of how to take the country back. So they were playing the long game like years ago, and they had this plan in motion, and because nobody pays attention to school board meetings, it was incredibly successful for a while. And they were they were getting Moms for Liberty would turn a school board, and Moms for Liberty had a document that you could sign up for on their website that said what to do in the first 100 days after flipping a school board. So they were telling everybody, here's what you do. And it's why school superintendents were being fired if they didn't go along with the more conservative opinions of the Moms for Liberty candidates or Moms for Liberty supported candidates.
Because they would take the school board first and then leverage that power.
Absolutely. Yep.
Wow.
Very insidious.
Yes.
You know, when you
It is.
Yeah. How that taking over that system, especially when we're talking about children and the future, of the country,
Yeah.
to kind of come in at that level and try to, distort the truth and control thought and what's available. Certainly alarming. But
Yeah.
I'm glad your film is really exposing a lot of that and showing the hope that's there in terms of the youth fighting back against that.
And there's still a lot of work to do. I mean, people have to, adults also have to support the young people. So there are a lot of things you can do. And we have a website, bandtogetherdoc.com. And we do have a resource page on that website where people can go and find out websites that have toolkits for how to fight book bans in your community, like the American Library Association's Unite Against Book Bans has that. PEN America has that. There are a number of them. So we do list those. We list websites that connect student activists with other student activists. And then there's a section, it's like, if you really want to step up in a big way and run for school board, here's how to do it. And we welcome anybody sending us other resources that we don't have up there. It's a work in progress still. So we welcome additions to that.
Allyson, I was very curious about, we heard from Jennifer Jenkins in the film, who ran for school board. We heard from some educators as well in the film about safety and personal attacks and doxing and some real kind of dangerous kind of elements around standing up for First Amendment rights, standing up for against censorship. How have you seen that play out both during the course of the film and after? Has there been more seriousness taken around that? What has the effect been of that threat of violence or against personal safety? How has that impacted the movie?
And actually, to that, I also wanted to throw in, because this lines up with what I was about to ask too, the weaponization of words like pedophile and groomer and those sorts of accusations being lobbied at anybody who is, willing to defend these books or people who support this sort of, literature.
Feels very McCarthyist, and I think that's mentioned in the film at one point as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So it is, I don't even know where to start with the answer to that. We have watched it play out, in terms of talking to the people who have experienced this. And one of the people in the film talks about the fact that she was a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. So when they do this heinous thing of using that word and throwing it around at everyone that disagrees with them, they really undermine how serious that term is and what it actually should be applied to. So this woman not only went through the trauma of that as a youth, she's getting attacked for doing her job and trying to teach our children, and a word like that gets thrown at her, which has to bring everything, is such a trigger. It just brings that emotional trauma right up to the surface again, being called something like that. The teachers and librarians that we have spoken with have been so emotionally harmed by this. They don't, I'm having trouble finding the words, just like they were having trouble finding the words. You just can't even believe that people would be so horrible as to do something like that to people that they know good and well are not actually pedophiles. So, I think people do take it seriously, but at a certain point, people don't know what to do about it. When people are doxing you online, your information's out there. You can't really change what schools your children are going to or how old they are and all of that kind of information.
Are there legal recourses available to kind of fight back against this? Because I mean, it's certainly not in the realm of, I would think, accepted or legal, things that are being done here, and certainly around doxing and public information, certainly around minors. I mean, that was quite alarming that information was being made public about minors as well.
There are laws in place in certain states, and the ironic thing is Randy Fine in Florida was one of the people that he introduced some legislation in Florida about cyberbullying, and then he broke his own legislation. We have that headline in the film because he was doxing Jennifer Jenkins online and sending people to her home and telling people that she was abusing children, and they would attack her and email her. And he just won a seat in the House of Representatives in one of the open seats in Florida. So yeah, so he's a congressperson now. He was a state representative, and now he's a national one.
It's
In
insane.
terms of legal recourse, the two teachers in the film have both initiated separate lawsuits against the parent in the film who had been harassing them and posting about them online. And they had all of his posts on social media, which we can't show in the film because in terms of copyright law, because if it's your page and it's your account, you own the copyright. And none of those people are going to give us permission to use it. So, but we do have all of that as backup if anybody ever questions it. And they have both sued him. So that's in process right now.
Well, that's
It
good to
does feel
hear
like, though, that
Yeah.
if the fight is continuing. Sorry, go ahead, Todd.
Yeah.
yeah, no, just was going to say it feels like some of what maybe has been working for that push to get these books taken out is the fact that people who decided they wanted to be teachers, people who decided they want to sit on school boards, this sort of pushback and to this extreme isn't something that they were anticipating having to deal with. And for a lot of people, again, with the weaponization of those accusations, with the doxing, with everything else, it's not something that they have the capacity to deal with. A lot of average people, when they're confronted with stuff like that, are just like, I don't know how to process this. I don't know how to deal with this. I'm just going to tap out for my own, whether my safety, my mental well-being. And, it's difficult.
It is difficult. And, another thing that's happening is that educators and librarians are leaving their professions. They've already been undervalued and underpaid
Doesn't
for a
surprise me,
long
yeah.
time, but having to do this, and Jonathan Friedman from PEN America in the film talks about that a little, about how they're leaving their professions at times. And one example he gave in the film is that one teacher said she was going back to teach her 2005 curriculum because she thought that wouldn't get her in trouble. Because the laws that are being passed in the states are intentionally vague. It's so open-ended that people don't really know what it means to, like, they don't know if they're crossing a line. They don't know if doing this is breaking this part of, like, the new laws. So everyone's just afraid. They don't know what they're allowed and what they're not allowed. So, they better safe than sorry, a lot of people are figuring.
Totally, yeah.
Allyson, can you take us into kind of the final moments in the film where we see our three students actually get to present at the American Library Association, and just what the impact of that particular speech and all their work has led to?
That was a very exciting moment. The American Library Association had a Freedom to Read rally the night before their annual conference started. It was in Chicago. And the fact that the three of them got to stand up on stage and talk to a crowd who gave them standing ovations, and we had a trailer that the crowd was able to watch, and that got a standing ovation. And It was really wonderful because the three of them got to feel the appreciation of the adults, whether they are a librarian or a teacher or just an adult that is opposed to what's been happening. But especially when talking to librarians and teachers, that they could feel the appreciation from adults for the work that they had been doing, because when they fight against book bans, they are fighting for teachers. They are fighting for librarians. And I think they were all able to really feel what that meant to all the people out there that, they hadn't met before that. They were in their town speaking at their school board meeting with the little groups that showed up there. So it wasn't until those kind of things started happening and they were speaking to a wider group that they could really see what their work meant on a much broader scale, not just to their local community, but to so many people. And I think that was really special for them. And they're all three in college now. And two of them are in college in South Carolina, and one is in DC at Georgetown. And they are all continuing their activism in different ways. Millie is an artist. So she always said she was going to be an artivist. Her art would be her way that she would express her activism. And Izzy is also, she's not sure where exactly she wants to land, but she knows it will be advocating for people who, marginalized voices who are being silenced, whether it's in the literary community or in some other capacity. But she knows that she will be working to advocate for people. And Lizzie, who is at Georgetown, is interested in politics and legislation, and she has continued to do that. She just finished a fellowship for students through PEN America, so that her connection with PEN America came out of the film. So I think it's just going to continue to be brighter and brighter future for all three of them in different ways.
So, you just talked about some, potentially hopeful futures for our three sort of stars, or, however you want to put it, of this film. Coming out of the documentary, though, for yourself, looking at the climate of the U.S. as it is now, how it looks moving forward, where are you at? Do you feel there's hope? Do you feel it's hopeless? Do you feel it's maybe somewhere between those two things?
Well, this will give me a chance because I would like to apologize to the whole of Canada for where our country is, and that we basically are burning this bridge with our greatest ally. There are millions of people in this country who feel that way. So please don't think it's all of America who are supporting this administration.
We don't. I was in Seattle about a month ago and talked to a few people there that were like, please don't think it's all of us. It's not. And I think we're well aware. I think we're in Canada. We're well aware, but we are also, unfortunately, pushing back a little bit against, what,
as you absolutely should,
those in power are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of the climate here, I believe it's going to get worse before it gets better. I feel like what's happening in a lot of places around the world, and I'm hoping this is the case, is that old ways of being, old systems that are in place are crumbling, and they're doing it by pushing their own agendas so aggressively that people are like, whoa, 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 we're not supporting this anymore. And I think that is, gaining steam here as we all try to find our footing to figure out how best to fight back against what's happening on a massive level, not just in terms of book bans, but in terms of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, is the short answer.
Yeah. And that, I think, is unfortunate. I know you talked a little bit about Project 2025 in the film, and the potential kind of effects, and this is one prong, of that plan. And unfortunately, what we're seeing right now is a lot of success from that plan. To kind of point back towards the hope, where are the areas? I mean, we've talked about Florida and South Carolina where, the battles don't seem to be going as well as anticipated or as hoped for. But where are the areas that are kind of bright spots right now where, the fight against censorship, against tyranny, as it were, are, you're seeing success there? Where are these bright spots that we can kind of look to right now?
I don't know if I have, like, specific locations that I can point out because I think there are bright spots with small wins in in states across the country, just like there
That's
are.
good to hear. That's better than there only being a handful.
Yeah, because even it's not even just, Florida and South Carolina. You see Iowa banned over 3,000 books. I mean, they're one of the top book banners now is Iowa. And, you know, Texas has always been bad in terms of book bans. Texas and Florida were originally the top two. So there are losses all over the country, but there are small wins all over the country, and the small wins happen when people get together, when they band together, different spelling, when they band together so that you're finding community where you are all on the same page about this, even if it's not 100% about every little, facet of the issue. You're finding communities that can get together and come up with a plan about how do we fight this as a group, because groups are always going to have more success than individual people, although individual people matter. And you saw it in the film. Izzy was the first one to stand up at a board meeting, and it was totally by accident. She was there to watch, I think, her little cousin perform, and they had public comments, and one of the issues was book banning, and she talks about, so she got up, she was very nervous, she was kind of stumbling a little bit and saying, I wasn't really expecting to talk, but her little brother had OD'd and almost died from drug overdose, I think the previous weekend or very shortly before that. And so she wanted to talk about how banning books about drug use isn't going to prevent, you know, drugs from being taken, because she's like, my brother doesn't even read and he overdosed. So it didn't come from a book. And because she had the courage to stand up, and the other young women and young men who were part of Delos saw this, they were like, we could do that. So individuals are important because you might be the first person to stand up in an area where nobody has stood up before, and that gives other people permission to do the same thing. Like, your act of courage enables other people to step into their own courage and step up and take action. So individuals are important, but it's finding these communities so that you are mobilizing as groups to take action on a wider level, because once they start seeing groups who then combine with groups and combine with bigger groups, and it starts being massive protests like you saw here about the hands-off protest here in the States recently, those start being hard to ignore after a while, because obviously more and more and more people are getting together to fight back. And at a certain point, people start listening. At a certain point, it affects people's finances when they start losing support from large groups of people. And the group that's in power right now, they care about the money. They care about making money. All these billionaire oligarchs in this country now are getting together, consolidating power, implementing legislation that allows them to consolidate more power. So that's been hard to fight back against because it's been happening so rapid fire, which was by design. Because when you do something after something after something, and people don't know where to even start. So they did that intentionally. But at a certain point, it's going to be affecting enough people, including their original supporters, that it is going to blow up in their face, I think.
Well, and I hope we're already starting to see some of the, initial pieces of that. We certainly, from our perspective in Canada, try and support and ensure that we, are helping things move in the right direction versus not. But there's a lot to still fight, a lot of battles to fight. I wanted to kind of go outside our comfort zone a little bit and talk about, one of the other tactics that we're seeing is this attack on DEI and, the efficacy of these policies and how they're, now perceived as detrimental, and there's this whole other, prong in this attack that is still targeting a lot of the same voices that are trying to be silenced through book banning, and these are kind of working in tandem. Can you walk us through kind of your experience with that kind of attack on DEI, and how it relates to the censorship that we see in this film?
The book bans, and this goes back to your question, Todd, about the weaponization of certain phrases and words. They started labeling everything as CRT, which is critical race theory. And critical race theory is a college-level course. It's not taught in elementary and middle school and high schools. It's a college-level course. It's been around since, I believe, the 70s. But they know that when you demonize a word or a phrase and apply it to so many things, which they did, anything that touched on race in any way, anything that touched on the history of America and racial prejudice, which has been here since the beginning, they labeled it CRT. This CRT is horrible, and it's actually racist against white people. And what that does is tap into all of the people in the country who have a racist belief system, and it empowers them. So all these people are suddenly empowered to start attacking anything that has to do with race or racial prejudice. And so that is how then it led into, like, let's just get rid of anything that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, because they don't want things to be diverse or equitable or inclusive, because they would like to go back to I was going to say 1950s. I should say like pre-Civil War, actually, with some of them.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be what some are trying to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, they would like it to be this narrow worldview of straight, white, Christian people where the families are dominated by the male in the family, and that's what they're trying to go back to, which has also led to the latest thing, the SAVE Act here in the country. This is like going off the subject of book bans, but the SAVE Act says that your legal name, to be able to vote,
Yes.
your legal name has to match your birth certificate. And for all the women who got married and took their husbands' names, they no longer would be able to vote. And I watched a video of a woman who said she had introduced legislation or introduced an amendment to it that would give protections to married women who had changed their name when they got married, and the Republicans blocked it. So it's people of color, it's LGBTQ plus people, and it's women. Like, let's get rid of all of them. Oh, and students, because they know that younger generations don't tend to be as conservative as their parents unless they're indoctrinated into that old belief system. So everything they've been doing in terms of like voter suppression laws has been aimed at not allowing students to vote on campus. Now they're attacking women so that women won't vote. Like, all the groups that don't typically vote Republican, we're all under attack here now.
Well, certainly not, great news as far as all the battles and all the fronts that need to be fought to, ensure that people of all, races and beliefs and genders have their voices heard. But it does sound like there's hope, which is great to hear. It sounds like there are people mobilizing across the US to stand up to this kind of erasure of freedom. I mean, I found even there was a comment, I think, in the film about how the Moms for Liberty, I mean, they're essentially doing the opposite, right? They're trying to really take away liberty, and just the irony of that, while a little bit humorous, is also very sad. And we definitely want, people to come together and to fight against that. And we hope things turn around, although I know we see there's some still dark clouds on the horizon, but we will support with our voices here in Canada as much as we can. Todd has been very vocal about not only censorship and the arts and fighting back against that, but, we're very much in favor of inclusion and of all people having their chance to be heard. So, whatever we can do here to help support, we will continue to do. But yeah, it is sad, just that
I think
erasure
I
of
think
liberty.
it's it's worth noting too that unfortunately there is a certain amount of bleed that's happening from the US into Canada, and some
Mm.
of those ideas are getting picked up by people here, by some of the political parties here that are on the further right. And
In Europe as well, same thing is happening in
yeah,
Europe.
exactly.
Yeah, everywhere, South
Um,
America.
and so in a way, I guess I'm hopeful that in those other places like Canada and in Europe that we can sort of see the more progressive people are able to sort of see what's happening in the US and maybe prepare themselves to push back more as it starts to happen in their countries. Because I don't think, like you said, it's not over for the US. And I don't think it's over for like the spread of that sort of thing around the globe either. We're just kind of getting started with the fight, sadly.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to make sure I mentioned, one of the dark clouds that's still on the horizon is about our public education system, because part of Project 2025 was to eliminate the Department of Education. And you've found throughout history, like every few decades, there's a new attack on the public education system, by the Koch brothers, by the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation are big supporters of Moms for Liberty because they don't want it to be diverse. And public education has to serve all kids and have a space for everyone to be welcome and be able to learn and to be represented. And that is what they don't want. So by eliminating the Department of Education, or right now they're cutting it off, cutting the legs off of it so that even if it's still there technically, it will not be as effective. And, they don't want public education. They say it's because the left is indoctrinating the kids, but all the left is doing is making space for all kids to be represented and be equal. And so, yeah, that's a dark cloud that's still on the future, to see what happens with our public education system, because that will be a real loss across the board if we lose that.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
I mean,
insane. I can't even imagine that's part of the conversation. It's insane.
I know, it is
yeah.
insane.
Well, I mean, the tactic there, right, is that if you do not have educated youth, then what you're talking about before, like the people that are standing up at meetings, that are coming together in high schools and universities, you don't have those people at all, because you don't have a system where they're even being exposed on any level to anything that can help educate them about what's going on, whether it's in their own country or globally, right?
Right.
And that's a very, very frightening tactic. And to see that kind of playing out in real time right now, certainly very frightening. Good to see that people are still fighting, though.
Yeah.
That fight is alive and well, and that people are pushing back.
Yeah.
If there's anything else that you want to kind of illustrate from the film that maybe we glossed over or didn't get a chance to address, we'd like to kind of get your thoughts on that. And then as we wrap up, if you could just kind of walk through some of the websites and things where people can go to either learn about this, to help contribute, to stand up in their communities, it would be great if we could get some of those resources.
And where people can watch the film too.
Yes.
People can now watch the film. It's available to watch on Apple TV Plus and Amazon Prime Video. So that started as of last Thursday. And Fandango at Home and a few other platforms will be added soon as well. I do want to mention the sponsors of our National Impact Campaign. PFLAG National, the National Education Association, and Interfaith Alliance have all come on as financial sponsors so that we can continue to offer screenings around the country and to go and speak on panels and do things like that. So we very much appreciate our sponsors. I hope people will go and watch the film, and do go to our website. I mentioned we have that resource page, so they can find a lot of places that link them straight to those sites if they'd like to learn more on those sites.
And sorry, what was the website again, Allison? Just one more time.
It's banned, BANNED, together, doc.com.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Quick question. Do you see anywhere where your film is being banned itself? Has that come up at
Not
all?
yet, because it hasn't been widely available to the public. We did free screenings at public libraries leading up to the election because we finished later than we were hoping to finish. So we just told the ALA, we're like, let librarians know, anyone who requests a screening leading up, they can have it at no charge. So we've had about 75, or I think more at this point, pre-release screenings before it was released on Thursday. And they've happened across the country, and we've had a few in Australia. We had a screening in the UK at University College London. So they're starting that conversation with students there. Did I answer the question? I can't even remember what that last question was.
Oh, just about concerns whether you might see some action to
Have
ban
we
the,
been
the
banned?
film. Yeah.
I am sure we have not been yet, but I have absolutely no doubt that schools will not be able to show this in Florida. There's no way they're going to allow schools to show this.
Yeah.
Because Canopy and Video Project are doing the educational distribution and public libraries, so schools will be able to get this to use in classrooms, and I'm sure Florida will not allow that.
And maybe just to end on a, hopefully slightly lighter note, do you
More positive.
personally have a
Don't ask
favorite
me to tell a
band?
joke, because
No,
um,
no, 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 no.
I'm a horrible joke teller. Oh, there's so many great band books. There was one that I read right when we started filming. It was 19 Minutes, Jodi Picoult, and it was about a school shooting.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's one of the ones they originally complained about, saying it was pornography. It's like, if a school shooting to you is porn, you've got like serious issues. She did that so well, and she really gave all sides. Like, she humanized the character of the shooter, which people don't normally do, so that you could see why that situation built to the point that it did, somebody feeling excluded and no support and all the other issues. And she has gotten feedback from so many students about, when they read that book, they didn't feel so alone, that they saw that other students felt that way as well. She had one school, we didn't include this in the film, but there was one school where she talked about a kid who, the entire school read the book, and a kid said, I was going to bring a gun to school, and this changed my mind. This book changed my mind. So for anybody saying that books just introduce, dark, negative ideas and fill kids' minds with that, sometimes these books about difficult subject, and all the ones Ellen Hopkins writes, Tricks, Identical, like, her books are difficult subjects, but it's because kids go through that. Teens go through certain issues, and reading a book that doesn't glorify what the book is about, but it lets a teen, know that they're not alone, and there is light on the other side of it. There are places you can get help. That is so incredibly valuable. So I think that was the first one I read when I started. And also Stamped is a great book. Stamped from the beginning, and then it was redone for a younger audience. Jason Reynolds worked with Dr. Eben Kendi and did the younger version. So there's so many good books. I hate to limit it to that, but
We definitely
yeah,
like to take
We'll
our
have to add
reading lists
19 minutes to our
from the banned list, but 19 minutes sounds like something we would want to cover in future episodes for sure.
maybe we'll pencil
Yeah.
that in after we're done 1984, which is what we're doing next.
An oldie but a goodie, still being
Well,
banned.
Oldie but a goodie.
It's interesting because there's elements of 1984 that are kind of almost applicable in this sense of that control element of that robbing of free thought, of getting rid of liberty and freedom that we saw through the film here, in terms of you know, trying to control people and not let them think a certain way or not let them experience certain things. So it is an old book, but strangely relevant
It's
in this
why
day and age.
it's why they ban books that deal with fascism, because
Yeah,
people go, "Hey, wait a minute." And they don't want people recognizing the current day with what's in that book.
yeah.
Well, Allison, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And again, congratulations on the film. Great work and a great, important subject. I thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And that'll wrap it up for us. Until next time, I've been Todd Sullivan.
I've been Peter Ammon.
And I've been Allyson Rice, so please go read a fucking book.